1848. Within the mid-1840s, many countries in Europe would be seeing economic crisis and mass poverty. In countries like France and Paris, demonstrators would cry out for the want of moving from a capitalistic society to a more liberal stance. The news rung out all throughout Europe and even made its way to Germany, where they would become inspired to do the same and start a revolution of change. However, unlike France and Paris, Germany's revolution was not successful, spawning in many theorists who would still be unhappy with the lack of change. One such person was Karl Marx, a German theorist in 1848 who would publish a manifesto dubbed the Communist Manifesto, which detailed the conflict between the working class and the ruling class in capitalistic societies. Karl Marx believed capitalism was very exploitive and self-destructive, that the correct society would move to socialism and eventually become a commune, and finally that the economic class systems are a man-made construct. However, Karl's way of thinking was not without its flaws. Actually, his theories had many flaws. Years after it has been shown that Karl Marx's ideas have cleared the way for totalitarianism to take effect. Marxism has inflicted misery on tens of millions of people with its creation. Marx has had an anti-Christian view which contradicted his entire argument, being that the class system was unfair, but has views that made him biased to those of religious standings. And Marx treated all thought as expression of economy. Basically, in much less words, Karl Marx was hyperfixated on economic class systems and had little focus on literally everything else in civil society, making it doomed from the very start. Now, what if I told you that a game by the name of Mouthwashing, where you become stranded at space and have to battle a bleak reality of hopelessness within the human psyche, was somehow a conversation on capitalism and Marxism? Well, if you're interested, stay tuned. Now, if you've been on this channel before, then you know how this is going to work. Before I can deep dive into the topic at hand, I want to first go over the entirety of the game so that way both new viewers of my channel and new viewers of the game can all be on the same page. So, firstly, we'll go over the game in its entirety, like I said before. Then we'll talk about the conclusion, and once we are done talking about the conclusion, we'll then branch off into different subjects such as like the characters and the story at hand, the inspirations, the deeper meanings, all that junk. And my favorite, we are going to go over the story in chronological order at the very end, just to get the full scope of things. So, spoilers beware. Pony Express, Long Haul, Space Rider, Tulpar, Crew, 5. Planned shipment duration, 382 days. Elapsed transit time, 147 days. I hope this hurts. This game begins in what looks like a cockpit control system room. Everything seems to be going fine until whoever we're playing as decides to touch something, making the autopilot engage to avoid collision of a nearby asteroid. But again, our main character fetches the emergency key and comes across an ID with the name Anya on it, and then proceeds to override the autopilot, once again causing the ship to go into imminent danger. As the ship gets closer and closer to colliding with the floating boulder, the main character runs around the hallway as things get more and more tense, and then cartoon horses make its appearance right before the ship crashes. Two months after the crash. This is the first time we meet the crew. We've got Swansea, an old fart who seems to have been in this profession for far too long and can be a stickler for the rules. Next, we've got the young and bright intern, Daisuke. I hope I'm saying his name right. He's always happy and energetic, and even within tragic situations, he somehow manages to keep the same old charm. Then we have Anya, the woman we saw at the beginning of the game. She's the crew's nurse, medical advisor, site counselor. She does it all really. Then the character we play as is named Jimmy, the second in command turned captain after the crash 2 months earlier. Apparently they've been stranded at space, and with them still having 8 months left until their destination, being found seems like a miracle at this point. But even still, their entire job is to ship huge cargo of stuff, so maybe there is something that'll help the crew until they get rescued. Just maybe. Anya thinks it's worth a look, Daisuke just wants to see out of curiosity, Swansea doesn't even want to look altogether, and Jimmy just goes with whatever the masses say. Jimmy seems to lack the respect of the crew, especially Swansea, as he has to keep correcting him on the title, and Swansea seems to be very protective of the utility closet. But more on that later. Other things to note before moving forward, the crash for whatever reason has created a ton of foam, plugging up any air sockets so that way they don't, well, get sucked out into space. There's about 4 months of food left for the crew, and the previous captain named Curly is still very much alive and is badly injured. Anya is taking care of him and trying to ease his pains via painkillers, but even then, she can't stand the sight of blood. So most of the nights Jimmy is the one to do it, making this disgusting, visceral and saddening noise every time you do it. Quite hard to listen to, I know. While Jimmy was giving his meds to Curly, more like forcing it down his throat, Anya couldn't stand the sight and ran out of the room. When Jimmy would go to check on her and tell her all about the shortage of the medication, she'd ask why. Why did the captain do it? Well, I guess the captain was the one we were playing at the very beginning. He was well respected for years now, and even thought to be a truly good person with a sound mind. So why? Why did he crash the ship on purpose? Jimmy says asking that question changes absolutely nothing, and they need to keep their heads on straight. Then comes to a shit ton of boxes down below the deck. 7 days before the crash. We are in the point of view of the previous Captain Curly as he's getting a psychological evaluation done. Anya, of course, is in charge of this evaluation and says that he's looking good, albeit a little tense, and also that she wishes that he'd open up more because his answers were the same as last time. But he simply just says that it's just to keep himself on his toes and if anything were to happen, and that he's literally all good. She then brings up something about Jimmy and how he's been dodging these evaluations with her, and said something about something troubling about being sexually attracted to the cartoon horses that is the mascot of Pony Express. Being pretty weirded out, Curly says he'll talk to him one-on-one and he'll handle it. He goes to find Jimmy, but something seems to be transpiring with the other crewmates. After settling the conflict, Curly would go up to bring up these weird things he said earlier, but obviously Jimmy doesn't want to talk about it in public and asks to meet him in the cockpit. But Curly seems to have lied about how much stress he's truly under. As he would make his way to the cockpit, reality begins to break as the word warning error alerts. A vast void space which seems to stretch on forever and ever, and finally he would come to find himself in a completely white space with a single door in the distance. I believe this is Curly's stress manifested. He fears being lost in space under his command. He fears the inevitable warning error bound to happen, and very much seems to be burning up from the stress of being captain and the stress of what more of life could obtain. But more on that in just a second. Within the cockpit, the evaluation goes rather smoothly. He deems sane and fit to continue working, and then they go off the record. Curly asks how is he doing on this trip so far. Jimmy says he's doing just fine, and the two really begin to just start opening up. Jimmy says how much he hates Curly with how good everyone speaks about him, making him a bit envious of him as a person, and Curly opens up about his future. He feels like he's climbed to the highest step on this current ladder and thinks if he should just try something new, which terrifies him but also excites him greatly, as he may be able to find that there is something worth more out there in life. Jimmy seems to take the information well and even agrees with him to a certain degree, or so that's how it seemed. Suddenly, a message would interrupt the conversation, and it would be a message from their corporation. Two months after the crash, Jimmy and the crew all take a look at what's in the cargo, and it's fucking mouthwash. Everyone seems to be in utter disbelief. Something I forgot to mention is that within this world or time period, space transportation has become the norm, and many companies have transferred into fully automatic space travel, except for Pony Express. Pony Express still very much uses human pilots for cargo transportation. And when the crew found out that they were supposed to be in space for 382 days for fucking mouthwash, it was almost laughable. They're willing to throw human lives away for mouthwash. Swansea, the oldest of the crew, has been an alcoholic, but has been sober for over 15 years. But this was his last straw. He had been a tad bit hopeful, even if he said otherwise, but this, he could not handle. He found out that the mouthwash has 14% ethanol and decided to start drinking it to feel something. I mean, they were going to die anyways, right? 6 days before the crash. The next day, Curly decides to tell everyone the news. What that is, I'm actually not too sure yet, because before he could tell them, he's surprised with a celebration. Apparently on these trips, since they take up to a year to complete, a crew member is randomly selected to be celebrated each travel, and this time it's Curly. Curly, not being able to keep it from everyone any longer, tells them that they're basically gonna get laid off by the end of this trip. And basically no one likes to be fired, and they all get mad, sad, or disappointed, but not Jimmy. Jimmy takes the conversation they had earlier and spins the words to make it seem like Curly wanted this all along, saying things like, "You finally got what you wanted," or "Moving on to bigger and better things, right?" Or better yet, my favorite, "Abandon the crew but remain the model captain." This guy has some serious inferior insecurities. He's so upset about a decision that had nothing to do with Curly, but even still spins it in a way where it sounds like Curly was talking ill behind everyone's back, waiting for this moment to finally leave and to do better things in life. 2 months after the crash, Jimmy is awakened from his slumber from the moans and groans of Curly. He checks to see if Anya has given him his meds yet, but when he finds her, she seems to be talking to Swansea, all teary-eyed. He ignores her, whatever was going on there, and asks her if she gave him the meds yet. She says no, so he ends up having to do it again. While he gives Curly his meds, Jimmy starts to break down, knowing how everyone is looking at him, talking behind his back, but this is what the captain has to deal with, right? So if Curly could do it, so could he. This will be a common segment moving forward, but we go into Jimmy's mind as words that are unclear are in the middle of the screen. Jimmy would sit with Curly and have yet another conversation. It is unclear if these conversations ever truly happen or if it's all in Jimmy's mind, but they would speak on the future. How most times we're always working towards something. For Curly, he'd like to buy a house, a farm, ride a horse, fall in love. But right now, what truly makes him happy, or at least brings him happiness, is to sit down with a dear friend and eat some cake. As Jimmy goes to find a knife, he'd settle for a goddamn axe, and when picking it up, Curly's eyes can be seen watching him all through the warning monitors. As he would come back, the room is extra dark, the screen has been shattered, and instead of cake, it seems Jimmy will be eating Curly. 2 months after the crash. This seems to be the aftermath of finding out that the cargo has nothing but mouthwash. Swansea is drunk as fuck, and Anya seems to be battling the pros and cons of drinking the mouthwash. She ultimately thinks that it wouldn't fix a thing and instead tells Jimmy that behind the foam, more meds can be found, aiding in their survival. Jimmy would go and ask for the axe from Swansea and he'd give it to him, just not in the way he expected. With the axe, Jimmy would clear the foam and get the medicine. Anya is somewhat surprised he actually did it, something we'll actually get into later. She then asks if he could give the meds to Curly again because she just can't do it. Jimmy absolutely blows up, saying how this entire time the crew hasn't done a damn thing and that everything is resting on his shoulders. Jimmy finally breaks under all the pressure and rushes to give Curly the meds and gives it to him quite aggressively, I might add. Small rant, but I absolutely love how the game used the quest indicator as stress blocks, so to speak, I guess, for Jimmy. Because yes, the entire game people have been asking both Jimmy and Curly to do all sorts of things, and it's awesome how the player helped aid to the downfall of Jimmy. It's just really cool. Jimmy finally understands Curly and begins to understand just how much work goes into being a captain, and also understands why Curly wanted to leave and start anew somewhere else. 6 hours until judgment. It seems like Jimmy has locked himself within the cockpit and Swansea is trying to get it open. He wants to kill Jimmy, chop him up into little pieces, he says. Within this section we are to find something, anything to fight back, and he ends up finding a metal pipe and some rope. But before we could see what actually happens, 2 days before the crash. 2 days before the crash was the calm before the storm. Curly and Anya sit and talk about the big screen and how it's used to be an illusion to help ease the mind of those on board. However, for Anya, she could always see the dead pixels and could never truly ease her mind. But then she mentioned something ominous. She asked, why doesn't Pony lock the sleeping quarters like they have locked on the medical room? 4 months after the crash, Daisuke comes running to Jimmy, saying that Anya has gotten stuck in the medical room. Thing is, she isn't stuck there, she just refuses to come out. Jimmy, being the terrible leader he is, does a shit job at calming her down and tells her to get her emotions in check. Well, she doesn't, so Jimmy tries to figure out another way into the room, remembering that the vent from way back when. Of course, Swansea hasn't let anyone into the utility room since the crash, so in order to make him move, Daisuke and Jimmy plan to spike his drink, and well, it works. Within the room, the foam was not nearly as bad as he said it was. And within this room not only holds the vent to the medical room, but also holds a cryogenic capsule as a last-ditch effort. Jimmy believes Swansea just wanted to use it for himself, and that's why he hadn't let anyone in. They'll have to deal with that later, as the vent has some exposed wires and Daisuke has been told it is super dangerous. Even still, Jimmy gaslights him into doing it, and surprise surprise, Daisuke gets injured pretty seriously. But before succumbing to his injuries, he would manage to get the door unlocked and see what Anya has done to herself. 1 day before the crash, Curly searches for the gun case and worries if Anya has it. She does in fact have the case, but too bad she can't get into it. Curly asks her what the hell she's doing with it and comes to the realization that as a nurse of the crew, she's never had a psych evaluation, which could be the reason this seems to be coming out of left field. But she tells him that she's pregnant, and he knows exactly who did it and why they did it. Curly wastes no time and goes to confront Jimmy. 6 hours before judgment. Daisuke is quite hurt and the bleeding just won't stop. Not wanting him to suffer any longer due to Jimmy's delusions, he puts him out of his misery. Jimmy calls him a monster, and Swansea claps back, stating that he knows who's the real monster out of the two of them. All the stuff he said during his evaluations, how he essayed Anya and got her pregnant, and all for what? A fantasy? A time for him to play captain? where he gets the girl, gets the job he always wanted, and to become Curly, Jimmy feels threatened and goes to get the gun. There we see the grisly side of Anya. She has overdosed on painkillers, which makes you wonder, was that why she was so happy that Jimmy had managed to get it open? Jimmy would go to grab the gun and Curly starts to laugh hysterically as Swansea charges at him. Zero days before the crash. So apparently, Anya was able to speak to Jimmy before Curly had a chance to do so, and of course Jimmy just says nothing and walks off. Curly goes to speak with him personally and tries to plead for him to listen and calm down as to not do anything rash, but that doesn't work. Jimmy shouts that everything is over. What's going to happen when they get back? Nothing matters now. He's gone too far. Even if they were to make it back safe and sound now, he'll be out of work, having to face the consequences of his actions, all because Curly couldn't do his job right. That's right, Jimmy is blaming everything that happened on this ship as Curly's fault. The vents breaking, them being laid off, to Jimmy acting on his own sick fantasies on Anya. He's somehow blaming it all on Curly. But let me just pause the video here and say Curly isn't blameless. Actually, throughout the game it's implied that Curly and Jimmy have been friends for quite some time now, and is the whole reason why Jimmy was able to get the co-pilot slot of the crew. Curly truly believed him to navigate alone and thought that he knew him, despite everything he had been told, and so when Jimmy goes to fix everything, that's more than likely why Curly didn't stop him. He didn't take responsibility sooner. Then it all comes full circle. At the very beginning of the game, we were witnessing a man knee-deep in psychosis attempting a murder suicide due to his actions on the ship, and as Curly tried to stop it, he was the only one to seriously get harmed and was used as a scapegoat for Jimmy's actions.
Hey guys, so this is just a reminder. I completely forgot. I went through the entirety of this video and I forgot to even say this, but if you're liking what you see here, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, like the fucking video. I don't even know, bro. Just do everything that you're wanting to do and just show some support with me, because I absolutely love making these videos and I absolutely love when you guys get notifications for when I post. So if you guys enjoy this, like I said, like, sub, hit the bell, do it all, do the holy trinity. And if you guys truly like what I do here, join the membership. Go down below. It is $1 a day, or not a day, Jesus Christ. It's $1 a month, or it could be $3 a month. Okay, $1 gives you exclusive videos and $2 a month gives you early access to videos. So I will see you guys. Let's get back to the video.
1 hour before judgment. It is unclear if Jimmy is just going through psychosis or if he's been drinking the mouthwash as well, or maybe a little bit of both. Whatever the case, he's full on crazy now. He would carry Curly to the birthday table, where all of his dead friends sat and lie. They all clap and celebrate and cheer Jimmy's name for being the best captain ever. An event originally for Curly has now become an event that Jimmy so desperately wanted for himself, and now he's earned it. Time to eat the fucking cake. Jimmy finally shows one last thing about his views on Curly. Jimmy was envious. While Jimmy was trying to figure out how to make a living, how to move forward in his life, how to reach a higher level in his life, how to just put food on the table, he saw someone he thought of as a friend gloating about how he wants to change career paths, not for the money or for the food or anything like that. No, he just simply wanted to, and that made him hate him so so much more. Why was it that it came so easy for him, but Jimmy was always second? Take responsibility. We enter into the mind of Jimmy again. He's crawling through a ventilation shaft and becoming completely surrounded by cartoon horses, and finally comes across a tied Swansea. Swansea is shown to be stalking him, axe in hand, being a constant reminder of his actions until Jimmy finally shoots him, triggering probably one of the best sequences within the game. Honestly, I'll just need you guys to experience it. I have something to say, so shut the fuck up and listen. I spent 13 years and a half in my eyeballs. Drunk, to put it mildly. Then suddenly I saw it, a streetlight shining in my face. 500 gigawatts of power of God. A vision of bloated body found in some ditch. Scared me straight. So I got a collar shirt, mortgage, and a credit card. All the things that make a good man. I hoped I could raise my kids to be better than their old man. I wanted to believe I was never one setback away from my worst self. But the truth is, discipline, drive, routine, the endless fucking desperation to get shit done. A loving wife, great kids, sobriety. I'm telling you, accomplishments I'd been chasing all my life, never felt as good as I expected when I crossed the finish line. So now that we're at the end of this, taking inventory, those nights spinning out of my head, sinking into the sofa, broken glass in my palms, bleeding dry, the funniest things ever. Old dogs laughing and snarling on the waterboard, mocking the moon for daring to show its face. All nausea and wreckage and vomit and ugly cruelty. The only problem in the world, an empty bottle. There were the best days of my life. Yeah, those were the best days of my life. I got nothing to hide, ready to face the music. I could see myself for what I am. But you, a cowardly, selfish motherfucker, and you can't even see it. I should have been able to protect the kid. If I could have done one thing right, I wish it would have been given us one small chance to get off this goddamn rock. Swansea, I'm going to fix everything. We're going to make it. Fuck you. After shooting Swansea, Jimmy has totally lost it. His mind is filled with blood and gore, cartoon horses, Curly's eyes watching his every single move, and a horse fetus, just showing how sick Jimmy truly is. After all he's done, Jimmy finally seems to understand what he has done was terrible and wrong. He wants things to go back to the way they were, but realizes he can't now. He's gone too far. So the only thing left to do is to at least fix this. 0 hours before judgment. We come back to the matter at hand. Jimmy, going through an enlightenment journey, decides he's going to fix this. Jimmy picks up Curly and carries him to the cryopod, puts him inside, turns it on, then takes the gun and offs himself, as again, Curly is forced to watch. Then, the end. It leaves an extremely bitter taste in your mouth, doesn't it? Almost like you need some mouthwash to get it out.
Is this nigga serious?
For a game about a crew stranded in space, it's no surprise that one of the most prominent things about the story are its characters. Each character helps reflect themes of the story, being that unable to see themselves through the view of others. Let's start with the main man himself, Curly. Curly is a bright guy who can be described with one word: dependable. Every one of the crew loves and truly respects both him as a friend and as a captain, all but one, that being Jimmy. Curly fails to see how his dear friend actually resents him, and due to his inability to see such things, leads him to trusting him into navigating the ship all alone. Rape Anya convinced Daisuke into trusting him and getting Swansea shot. It all started with him and how someone could truly hate him despite all the good things he was doing. Next, let's talk about Anya. Anya throughout the game is shown to be quite dependable. She seems to be very respected by her peers, and especially so with Curly. Curly trusts her with her psych evaluations, amongst other things. But one thing I noticed that shows this clearly is how Jimmy speaks to her versus how Curly speaks with her. Jimmy always says, "I'll fix this." But when Curly says the same thing, he'll always say, "We'll fix this. We'll figure it out together," making it more of an equal relationship. And even so, after being constantly belittled by Jimmy, she doesn't see herself as useful and ends up ending herself, failing to see the positive in herself. Daisuke is next. He's the young and bright intern, ready to learn and make bright new paths for his future. Unfortunately, he's unable to see the worst in people. Since Curly respected Jimmy and Swansea understood what was happening and hid his true feelings, Daisuke was left unable to form his own opinions of himself and others, simply becoming the naive intern of the ship, which ultimately got him killed. Another thing to add is that he always thought he couldn't do more. He thought he couldn't do enough. He felt as if he was never good enough, and that's why he's here in the first place, to try and find someone he respects, that he looks up to, and have them teach him to become a better him, to be skilled in whatever he's trying to pursue. Swansea is the old bastard of the crew, that hardened worker who has trouble showing his real emotions. He chose to hide the cryopod from everyone, not because he wanted to use it for himself, but instead because he didn't want to subject anyone, especially Daisuke, to even more suffering. He understood that the cryopod would just prolong the suffering as you would awaken 20 years later, hurting, alone, starving, and quite possibly floating in space if not found. But he was unable to voice this and ended up being misunderstood and giving another reason for Daisuke to end up trusting Jimmy. And finally, Jimmy himself. He thought of himself as such a good and honest worker. He thought what Curly did was far too easy, that everyone respected him for absolutely nothing. And this annoyed him. He thought how much of a better job, of a better man he could be if he was put in the same seat with the same opportunities. But opposite to everyone else, he simply thought of himself way too highly. He thought he could get Swansea to respect him. He thought he could play the role model for Daisuke. He believed he could become a better lover to Anya. He truly thought he could become Curly. So much so, he literally consumed parts of him. Even with all that, he realizes what a worthless trash he is. And in a desperate act of something, he tries to fix everything. But in reality, all he did was prolong the suffering of a so-called friend that he had the honor of working with. So, now I ask, how the hell is this game about capitalism and Marxism? Well, let's take a look at the characters and their names. So for right now, I have this this little thing up. I have this little script that I'm reading, and have all the names and what they mean, right? So the reason why I'm thinking I'm onto something, right, is that each of the names tend to reflect what their role is. For example, right, Anya is Hungarian for mother. I think that obviously points to her being a SA victim and pregnant by the time of her death. And I think that's just some weird fucked up thing. Then we have the name Jimmy, which usually means a suppliant or someone who replaces. And I think Jimmy's whole arc is that he's trying to replace Curly. He thinks he's better than Curly. It's more kind of like a situation of like Rick and Shane, where Shane truly thought he was going to be a better leader than Rick, a better man, a better father than you, Rick, a better lover, and it just wasn't the case. He truly thought himself way too highly and was way too emotional to be a good leader, and this is what caused Jimmy mostly to do everything he did was purely off of emotions. And then we have Daisuke, which usually means mediator or bless in Japanese, and I think they're just saying like he's blessed to be on there, I guess, like because he's like an intern, right? So a lot of times in workforces they'll look at interns like, this is a really good opportunity for you, you're very blessed to be here. And I think that's what Daisuke is all about. And then the last one, Swansea, is a little hard because I looked it up and I was like, what does Swansea mean? And it came up, and I don't know if this is true because I started looking on Reddit. People were like, that's not true. But in Wikipedia it said that it's Swansea just means Welsh for the mouth of a river. And then I was kind of thinking like, okay, well maybe the mouth of a river could just point to Swansea's alcoholism and how he truly thought that was the best time of his life. But then I also looked on Reddit, and then somebody who was actually Welsh was like, that's not true, because there's two type of names. You have one that is Swansea, and then you have another that doesn't quite mean river or like a mouth of a river. It more so means a river of a specific river. It's hard to explain, okay? So forget Swansea, forget Curly, but the other three, I feel like their names definitely reflect upon what their character arcs truly mean. Now for the story at hand. The entire conflict of the game revolves around the desperation of different working classes, how workers may view their work when delivering trivial items like fucking mouthwash across the galaxy, and how this could all lead to collapse within the system. It all started with Pony Express. In a world where man-driven cargo into space was going out of style, it was very strange for Pony Express to send 5 workers on a 382-day trip to deliver mouthwash when they could have easily transferred to a more automatic delivery system. And to rub salt into the wounds, they would send them up there and then proceed to lay them off mid-travel. It's inhumane, and decisions like this are made very, very commonly within the business. Companies do not care what your financial situation is looking like outside of the workforce. If they need to cut funding, then you're just numbers to them. Nothing more, nothing less. And for most, this could be life altering. However, for those at the top, it would simply be a change of a career path. We see this being the driving force of the game. Curly at the top of his career path doesn't think twice with jumping ship for a new path in life, while others like Jimmy are barely staying afloat as is. Obviously, Curly did nothing wrong here, but this envy strives from capitalism. Right before being laid off, Curly and Jimmy would talk about their views on the future, and Curly told Jimmy how he was feeling, and Jimmy truly seemed to understand because, well, Curly was still there. Despite how he felt, the guilt of leaving it all behind was just too much. So when getting laid off later that week, Jimmy felt betrayed. They all did. Anya has no savings and worries what she'll do. Swansea is owed for this type of job. With the way things are going, no one will need a ship maintenance worker, let alone a 50-something-year-old. Daisuke is young and still has his parents to provide for him, but he'll never grow his own career at this point. And Jimmy just can't understand how people like Curly get so much praise for doing absolutely nothing. In his eyes, he thinks Curly's got exactly what he wanted without the guilt involved. Curly has a good resume. Curly has good experience that he can put down. He's not worried about paying the bills or if he'll have food on the table. So being laid off really won't affect him nearly as much. Class systems, the root of all problems. But while I do think this game is supposed to be an anti-capitalist cautionary tale, I also think there's a bit more to it that most seem to kind of glaze over. I believe this game is trying to tell its viewer and its players to learn to be okay with themselves, to learn how to view themselves in the best light, and to ultimately choose yourself in the end, because if you don't, who the fuck will? Much of the problems that transpire in this game is from the mindset of a materialistic needs and obsession over titles. Curly is a good man but views his success from what he's currently doing. He wants to do more because he feels he isn't doing enough, but he's not looking to do more for himself. Anya hates blood and truly can't handle it, but even still, she finds herself on the ship with her job because to her, work equals worth. Daisuke's just there for the parents' wishes, but truth be told, he just doesn't seem like he should be there in the first place. He seems so out of place. And Swansea drank for 13 and a half years of his life and truly looks back at it as the happiest times of his life, and now strives to do good in the world because, again, work equals worth. And Jimmy is probably the best example of this by far. He wants what others have, yet has trouble taking responsibility for what he's done to get it. He equates his worth to the standard of someone else he looks up to, but then he puts them in an entirely different level, so obtainable that he can never grab it himself. All for what? More money? A better job? To be a leader? But what does Jimmy truly want for himself? He never stopped and never gave himself that goal. He just simply set a goal set by someone else's life and where they currently are in their life and how he wants it. Another thing I found to be quite profound about this game is its conversation on mental health and how important it truly is. A big part of the game are the psych evaluations that members have to do to make sure that no underlying mental illnesses are starting to develop while they're still out in space. But even with this, everyone has underlying problems. Everyone. Curly is shown to disconnect from reality every now and again, even though he says it's just to be tense, but literally, you can tell that he's stressed the fuck out. He has anxiety. Every time he's walking, he thinks he'll hear a warning at any given moment. Every time he's walking, he thinks someone's going to ask for his help. Every time he's walking, he gets so tunnel vision for things that he needs to do. And I think that's what all that represented when he was walking through space. He's fearing that everyone's safety is under his jurisdiction. He's fearing that the warning signs are going to come up out of absolutely nowhere and it's just going to end. He's literally burning up in the sun because everyone's eyes are on him. And finally, when he gets into that white space, he's just tunnel visioning. He's been told that he needs to do this thing, so everything else doesn't matter. Everything just whites out. He goes straight to that door and gets his job done. And going even further, more than likely this was only amplified by Jimmy, as he doesn't even try to fight back anymore and just sits there and stares at Jimmy. Was he scared? Is he pleading with his eyes, or does he just simply want the pain to be over? It's very unclear. Anya was definitely battling some form of depression as well, as her life up until now didn't seem to be the easiest, and she also seemed to be alone in this world. Taking her life was always in the back of her head. I think earlier when I had explained something, this is going to break you guys' heart because honestly, it broke my heart and it made me want to kind of choke up and cry. But did you ever realize and understand why Anya seemed to be so happy when he broke into the foam and everything else? Normally, Anya is pretty scared. She's pretty reserved. But the foam in the space capsule is a defense mechanism to keep the suction out, right? So it foams up if it ever were to get damaged, right? And so her encouraging Jimmy to break it, I think that was a way to just end it. She just wanted an excuse for it all to be over. And so she had asked Jimmy to do this thing, knowing the risk. She didn't care about survival. She had like 3 things that she was planning to do. If they ran out of meds, she knew there was always the gun. If she could never get to the gun, she was going to take the axe for herself, I'm thinking, and just completely destroy the whole thing. But no, she goes and he breaks it, she thinks that this is going to be over. Like, she's probably at any moment, whenever he hits the foam, they're all just going to get sucked out into space and just fucking, I think their head explodes. Isn't that what happens when you go to space? I digress. But when he came back and she sees that, wow, he actually got the fucking meds, it was now plan B. It was, okay, well, that didn't work. Plan B. She took the meds. I think her goal was always to die at a certain point. It was always in the back of her head. I think she had suicidal tendencies. Swansea may be going through forms of depression as well, as he gives in to his temptation like that before anyone else, and reflects on how his drunk years were his best years, not caring about anything except an empty bottle. And Jimmy, well, Jimmy is fucked up in the head and is more likely a sociopath, considering that no one really suspected him of such terror until it was far too late. The entire game, he thinks he's in the right. He thinks Curly's an asshole. He thinks he deserves this spot. He believes that everything he's doing is for the betterment. He thinks he can fix everything. But he's so good at lying at himself that he ends up lying to others. He blends in. He is the wolf in sheep clothing. One of the cooler things about this game is that it was told in a non-linear format, and I absolutely love when games do that. It started off where it began, but in a different perspective in which you understood it, and then it went before, it went after, and introduced the characters after a very prominent event, and then went back. Anyway, I think for these type of stories, it's always so cool to just take a look back and put all the pieces together and put it in chronological order, so that way we could see how it all transpired and how they could end up in such a horrifying situation. So let's first meet the cast. So of course, something that was implied throughout the game is that Jim and Curly were friends much before this trip in the first place. Actually, it seems that Jimmy was given this job because of Curly. We know that Curly was well respected with his comrades before, so I think it's safe to say that this wasn't their first rodeo working with Pony Express. So the nurse, Anya, and Swansea, Daisuke, I think they were all done this much before, except for Jim. Now it all started before the crash, 7 days to be exact. This is when we see Anya and Curly having their psych evaluation. Anya says that, hey, Jimmy hasn't had his, he keeps dodging me. And so he takes it into his own hands, and Curly goes to see Jimmy. Jimmy gives him the kind of the cold shoulder, and then he brings it up in public. He says, let's take it in public, or let's take it in private. They go in private, they talk about everything, and this is when the seat of betrayal was put, because Curly finally opens up and says, hey, I want to do something different. And then they're getting interrupted by some notification on the wall, and it's actually from corporation with the news that they have been laid off. The thing is that corporation knew that this could cause problems and told him to wait until they're closer to the end of the trip to do such things and tell them this stuff. However, Curly is a good man, unfortunately, and one day after, 6 days before the crash, he tells the crew about this business. This infuriates Jimmy and makes everyone sad. Swansea understands what's happening with Pony Express. Anya's confused on how she's going to make a living, and Daisuke, he doesn't really care because he's just going to go back home. Now Jimmy, he's betrayed. He's angry. This has watered the seed of anger, and it only gets worse from there. 4 days later, it seems that things are okay, right? Curly continues doing his job, Swansea continues doing his job, Daisuke's being taught under Swansea, and 2 days before the crash, Curly and Anya sit and it's kind of like the calm before the storm. She talks about how she never truly is at ease in this place because, well, when she's looking at the monitor, she always sees the dead pixels that take the illusion right out of the illusion. And so she also brings up a very foreshadowing point. Why doesn't it come with locks on the private sleeping chambers like it does with the medical room? Now, 1 day later, it is unclear when this happened, but Jimmy has raped Anya. We don't know if it was sometime before because she says she's pregnant. How does she know she's pregnant so quickly?
Lord knows. So it could have been something even before. And this is, honestly, my theory is 7 days before, maybe she had already gotten by Jimmy, and that's why she was afraid to talk to him. I think she may have lied about him dodging the evaluations because she truly just didn't want to have one-on-ones with him. Anyway, I digress. One day before the crash, Anya tells Curly that she's been and that she's pregnant. And unfortunately, hours later, Curly is too late because Anya goes to speak to Jimmy one-on-one, and Jimmy breaks. So, before Jimmy could do anything, Curly runs and tries to confront Jimmy about it, but due to his own view of himself and of Jimmy, he thinks it's best to give him space. And with that space is the opening of the game. And that is when Jimmy takes control of the emergency key and causes an explosion. And that is when Curly runs in and gets massively injured. Now a 2-month time skip happens. They are floating in space. The foam, the defense mechanism has been put in place. I'm trying to say, Jesus, has been put in place, and basically now foam is covering all forms of places. So certain places you can't get into. The medical closet can't get into. The utility closet can't get into. It's been foamed up. But 2 months after, they only have about 4-month-ish reserves left. So they need to figure out what they're gonna do. They talk about the cargo, right, that they're carrying. Maybe they have something, like if they're gonna be in space for 382 days, maybe there's something down there that can help. But before going down there to check, well, it's medicine time. We see Curly. He is injured. He is burnt to a crisp. He looks nothing like what he used to, unfortunately. We also see the cruel treatment of Curly right there when he sticks the fucking painkiller down his throat, and he is in so much pain that he starts to cry, moan, and groan. However, not too long after he's done with doing what that was, he goes down to check to see the cargo, and it turns out to be mouthwash. Everybody is distraught about it being mouthwash. Why would you send 5 human souls into space for 382 days just for mouthwash? And so people don't take it very happily. Daisuke, he doesn't seem to really change. He's more spacey. Obviously, Swansea goes and drinks the damn thing because he used to be an alcoholic back in the day. But 15 years of sobriety, right down the drain. And Anya thinks about if she should drink the mouthwash as well. She then goes to talk to Swansea, the essaying about Jimmy as a whole. And so this is when Swansea begins to understand just how far gone Jimmy truly is, but keeps it away from him, thinks otherwise, and tells Jimmy to go and try to break the phone because they're running out of meds and there's some in the medicine closet. When that doesn't aid in her ending her suffering, 2 months later, 4 months after the crash, Anya finally has enough and traps herself within the medical room. Something she talked to Curly about much earlier in the game. And so she traps herself in there, and while everyone thinks that she's going to harm Curly for getting her into that situation, something much more sad happens. She takes her life within the medical room. In order to get into the medical room, like I said, it was locked. Daisuke had to climb up into a vent, and he was ushered by, what's his name? He was ushered by Jimmy to go up there, even though Swansea said it was extremely dangerous. And of course, Daisuke dies. And this is 6 hours before what the game calls Judgment Day. 6 hours before Daisuke's death triggers something within Swansea. Now understanding just how much of a monster and a delusional psychopath piece of shit he is, Swansea takes it into his own hands and says that he will kill him. Chop him up into many pieces. And so he runs into the room, or chases Jimmy into the room. He locks the door, gets a metal pipe, and gets some rope, and he ambushes Swansea, tying him up with a gash on his head and giving him his last final speech before shooting him. Now,
It's an hour before judgment. He sits down, totally lost it at this point. His brain is telling him to take responsibility, but he keeps trying to think otherwise. Yes? But before he could finally come to this enlightenment speech and try to fix the situation, he would go to the deepest of himself, the worst parts of himself, and he would end up eating Curly because he wants so desperately to be Curly. And I think this both acts as symbolism and as metaphorical, that he is that far gone to the point where he is eating a man. Because remember, 4 months ago, Daisuke said there's only about 4 months left of food, and 4 months later, it seems like it is running dry. So maybe this is just him eating Curly because both he's hungry and two, he just wants to become Curly. But then finally realizes after doing the absolute worst thing possible, lining up all of his friends at a birthday table and eating his best friend, he wants to fix things. 0 hours before judgment, he puts Curly in the cryopod, closes it, goes to shoot himself, and says that he thinks that he fixed everything. But now, all he has done is prolonged Curly's inevitable suffering as he floats aimlessly through space, only to wake up 20 years later and potentially starve to death all alone.
I always have a problem at the end of these videos because I don't want to sound like a broken record, but a lot of the games do a very, very good job at displaying things that I've never known about myself until I am forced to like really think about it, right? This game is a very controversial one. I've seen it all throughout Reddit. People are arguing what this game could mean about or what could be about, and it's definitely anti-capitalism and stuff like that. Now, I won't get into it. I just like to say that that is what the game is about. Do I agree with it? I'm gonna let you decide that. I don't know. I'm not a very political person to ever grace this earth, so I don't really know. But what I do know is that this game affected me in ways that I could only think about this game for the 3-4 days that it took me to write this script. I thought about it endlessly. And this game it's something. I think this game is trying to tell you to just choose yourself, right? To always look at yourself in the positive light, to create goals for yourself. I think this game is trying to not allow people to be so materialistic, so obsessive over what they're going to leave behind in their life, and so worried about the future that they can't even live in the current day. I think that is why there was this one scene in the game where Curly was like, I'm always thinking about how I'm gonna have a farm, have a horse, this is what I'm working for, fall in love, get a wife, loving kids. But in the end, he said the only thing that's really making him happy right now is him sharing a goddamn cake with his best friend. I think, and then that's not even the only thing. It was another part where Swansea at the very end was saying that some of his best years was when he was living in the moment. Now I understand that he was dirt drunk all the time. He was an alcoholic and he only had one thing to worry about, which was an empty bottle. But I think they're trying to share this notion of living in the present rather than working towards a future and failing to experience life. I think that is the main problem. Jimmy wanted everything from the start, but he didn't have the work, nor did he have the altitude, the discipline to ever become a leader, someone worthy of Curly's respect. And you know what the odd thing is, and this is something so similar to characters like Guts and Griffith, is that within Berserk, right? For example, if you guys have watched Berserk, the whole dynamic, the whole problem between Griffith and Guts is that Griffith truly did look at Guts as a friend. But then when Guts heard that saying of how he can never respect a man who doesn't have dreams equal of him, he goes to get that very thing. But these two, not understanding that, one, Griffith already viewed him as an equal, and Guts had already attained being an equal, you know? And the whole conflict was there because they never understood that about each other. I think that is the biggest conflict with Jimmy and Curly. Curly thought of him as a close friend, and that's why he trusted him so wholeheartedly. And that's when it was so heartbreaking when he was on his deathbed, and when Jimmy went to go grab the gun, he started laughing because he was like, how could I ever fail to have seen the type of person you truly are? And Jimmy only did all that dumb shit because he wanted to become an equal to Curly. And somehow becoming an equal to Curly is becoming Curly in a sick, sadistic way, becoming Captain, getting Anya, and trying to gain the respect of Swansea. But he never, ever got any of it. So I say this to say, I think this game truly is just trying to tell you to try to view yourself through others' perspectives, not just your own, because you are your worst critic. Whatever you think worse is about, like, whatever you think someone is saying about you, you're probably saying 10 times worse things about yourself. And I think the game is trying to tell you that sometimes you just need to listen to the people around you, and sometimes you need to just live in the present. It's like a famous song that I always listened to as a child, and it was Billy Joel, Vienna, and one of the lyrics was, you can't be everything you want to be before your time. I understand that is so far left, but I like getting vulnerable with these type of videos. And while I've never been stranded at space, I do realize that I've been in the situation as Anya. I have been in the situation as Curly, and damn if I said it, I have been in a situation like Jimmy. Don't get me wrong, Jimmy is a piece of shit, and I'm not glad that he shot himself. Let me not say that much. But I don't feel any form of regret, guilt, or remorse for how it ended with him. But I can say that I can understand the insecurity and where it's coming from. As an art student, or when I was a art student, the biggest thing would be that every time you would get better, every time you would upgrade to the next level and really look back and be happy with your artwork, almost every single time I would find someone who was just far better than me. And I would always ask, why how did they get so good? I will never reach that level. And then boom, you blink 2 years later, you're at their level, and now you're better than now you're better than what they were. And so now you're just finding someone who's better than you currently, and you look up, how'd you get so good? What the fuck? It's not fair. I've been in that situation time and time and time again. There was a time in school where I was laying down in my dorm bed and I just didn't know what to do. It was one of those nights where I couldn't go to sleep and my mind was racing. And one of the bigger things of why my mind was racing was that time is moving. Time is moving, and it's moving fast. I was thinking to myself, I'm a junior in college. I only have one more year of this. What am I going to do after? Am I going to go home? I have my girlfriend here. Am I going to just leave her? That's going to end things surely. I'm like, what should I do? And I just started thinking, and it scared the shit out of me. It scared me. I was frightened. I was like, there is just no way in 2 years that I'm going to be able to make enough money to have rent and to do all these things while also being in school and working. But life has a funny way of showing you a path that you never even thought of. I did YouTube for fun. I was doing it and I would just get 1,000 views, 900 views. I wouldn't get paid anything. I was just doing it for fun. And my friend Zach comes up to me and says, hey, you should do these things, because we love those hour-long video essays. We watch it. We're kind of sluts for it, not gonna lie. But I digress. We would watch those things. And he was like, you know what? You know how to edit. Might as well make your own shit. I said, you're right. So I do one thing. I do Kitty Horror Show. I start with that. Then I do Buckshot Roulette. Start with that. And then I hit the lotto. Then I do Cry of Fear. Then that allows me to make money. I'm seeing, like, did I just make $400 for doing something I enjoyed? Then I keep doing videos. I throw another video out there. I do another video out there. They flop. Then I do Franbo. Franbo has 750,000 views, and I have made $5,000 from it. That is more money than I have ever fucking had in my bank account. And I made it from one video. And that's when I thought, this is how you're gonna do it. And so I kept doing it, and 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 I kept doing it. And from 2 years ago, when I thought in that bed and I said, there's absolutely no fucking way that I'm gonna be able to do this on my own. How am I gonna do this? Well, take a look, guys. I'm in my own space. I live in my own house. I have my own room, and I have a place that I can call home as I make money and do things like that. That story is basically meant to say, trust the process, man. If you put in the work, of course it won't be easy. But if you put in the work, something will bear fruit. Something will create a path for you. And if you're willing to take that path, if that path is what you want to go through, take it. Take it. Don't be like Jimmy. Don't be so fixated on someone you look up to the point where you put them on a pedestal that you're never going to be able to fucking climb. Okay? Don't do that. It's self-destructive, and it's not good. Not for the mental, not for you, and not for anyone else. Okay? So I say this to say, and I end this to end off. Choose you. Okay? Choose you and create a path for your own. Don't look at the guy next to you. Don't look at the girl next to you. Look at you in the mirror and say, I'm capable of that, and strive for it. Positively manifest what you're going to obtain and seriously work at it. And guess what? You might not get it. You might not get it. But again, as Billy Joel said, only fools are satisfied. Dream on, but don't imagine that it will all come true. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.